In this video, we're going to talk about lighting control in a GCX control system. There are several different types of lighting fixtures in the market. Some are controlled by 0 to 10 volt, others are controlled by a digital control signal sent by RS-485. Each different type of fixture requires a different type of interface in order to connect to it. Agritech control systems offer two different interfaces for these standard fixtures. One is the DXV4 module. This is a 4-channel 0 to 10 volt lighting controller. Each of the 4 channels can drive up to 50 fixtures per channel and are independently controllable from different function blocks. For digital light fixtures, there is an LXD module. The LXD module controls the spectrum to the light fixture through a digital signal. So fixtures with multiple different spectrum can be controlled through one interface. The LXD module is compatible with various different manufacturers. More manufacturers are added each day, so check the manual for the current compatibility with your fixture. Now let's take a look at the controls function blocks to actually operate the lights. Let's open up our Add a Function dialog and select the lighting function block. Let's open up our lights function block and take a look. On our settings tab, there aren't really any settings we can configure until we've selected the equipment that we're going to use. This is because it's dependent on whether they are 0 to 10 or digitally controlled lights. If our lights are dimmable, we can select the dimmable control option. We then have to select whether it's a 0 to 10 volt or a digitally controlled light fixture. We'll start with a 0 to 10 volt example. Let's select our 0 to 10 volt module and then the channel that we want to control the lights from. Next, if we have a contactor to control power to the lights, we can select that here. A contactor will allow us to turn power on and off to the lights. If we have a contactor module, we can select it. Otherwise, we can leave this turned off. If we're operating in a greenhouse environment, we may want to select a light sensor in order to control the lights based on an intensity level. This allows us to brighten or dim the lights in order to target a specific PPFD value. In indoor operations, we generally will not be using the light sensor. Finally, we can select a temperature sensor, which is commonly used in indoor growing, in order to dim the lights if the temperature gets too high. Once we've selected the sensor that we want to read from, we can decide whether we ignore the sensor or dim the lights if the sensor goes offline for any reason. Now that we've selected the equipment that we're going to be using, let's go back over to our Rules tab. On our Rules tab, we can see that we now have some options. If we want, we can select the lighting recipe. We'll take a look at that in a minute. Here we can see our dimmable light settings. We have a maximum intensity, a minimum intensity, and a change rate. The maximum intensity is what the lighting is going to try to get to. The minimum intensity is where you want to start and stop your dimming profile, and the change rate is how quickly you want to brighten or dim the light. So let's give an example. Let's say we want to get to 100%. Let's say that our lights will go down to 20%. And we want to have a change rate of 10% per minute. This is going to give us a transition time of approximately 8 minutes from when the lights turn on at 20% and ramp up to 100%. They will then ramp from 100% down to 20% about 8 minutes before the lights are scheduled to turn off. If we continue to scroll down, we can see our high temperature dimming options. So let's say that we want to dim the lights at 95 degrees with a dead band of 5. What this will do is if the lights exceed 95 degrees, it will begin dimming at the dimming rate that we have specified here of 10% per minute. When the lights get down to the minimum intensity, we can select what happens, whether they hold or the lights turn off completely. Now, the temperature will have to cool down by 5 degrees to 90 in this example before the lights will begin to start brightening again starting at the minimum intensity or wherever they have left off if they were dimming. Now let's take a look at a digital light fixture example. Instead of a 0 to 10 volt, we're going to select our LXD module. In this case, it's going to show us whichever manufacturer we have selected on the Device Info tab. If you don't see the correct device here, you will have to go to the device itself, the LXD, go to the Device Info tab, and select the correct manufacturer from the drop-down. Now that we've selected the correct LXD module for our fixtures, let's go back over to our Rules tab. When we scroll down, we'll see the same dimmable lights settings, but now we'll see spectrum recipe data that's relevant to the manufacturer of the light fixture. So let's put in some spectrum data that we want to have here, some set points. Okay, so now the light fixtures will get this recipe and it will be affected by this intensity. So we'll start off with 20% of all of these spectrum values, and it will ramp up to 100% of all of these spectrum values. So we'll have 90, 80, 70, 60 when the light fixture gets to the full intensity after the 8 minutes. Now, if you have multiple rooms in your facility, of course, and different schedules over time, rather than having to go in and adjust these values and configure them all independently and repeat each time, we can use the recipe editor. Let's open up our recipe editor, and this will open up the recipe editor dialog. At the top, we have a drop-down for different light fixtures and recipes that we've created in here. When the system is new, there won't be any, but you'll have to create your own recipes. So from the drop-down, we can select which one we want to edit. Here's the name that we can set for the recipe. In the recipe, you're going to specify whether it's an analog or a digital recipe. If you select digital, you're again going to have to select the manufacturer that the recipe is for. Selecting the correct manufacturer will give you the relevant recipe fields here. So we can specify what our dimming profile is, and then our spectrum recipe. Once we've created these different recipes, they can be used throughout the different function blocks on our system. So let's create a recipe for the light fixture that we are running. Week 1 veg, we're going to run the lights a little bit dimmer than normal. And we're just going to reduce the red. We're looking for stretch here. Okay, so once we've created our recipe, we can then select the option to use a recipe, and it's only going to show us the recipes that are compatible with the manufacturer of the light that we've selected in our module. So in this case, we can only see one of the recipes that's available in our recipe editor, the one we just created. Once we select it, it will then show us the data down here so that we can verify we've selected the correct recipe. Now, editing that recipe will, of course, change it on any function blocks that are currently using it. So if we want to make a change in one place to affect multiple function blocks, this is the way we can do it. Finally, we're going to want to schedule out this rule. If we're using the photo period for the room and it's configured correctly in our dashboard where we have our day and night time set, we can simply set our rule to operate during the day. However, we can also set a custom time range for this lighting rule to operate. We'll say from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Of course, we can add in additional scheduling rules such as by certain days or during certain vegetative, flowering, propagation, and other stages. We simply create different rules in our list and configure the schedule out and the different settings as we choose. And this completes the configuration of the lighting function block on the GCX controller.